Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 228, In the Future. Fei Shen was quite meticulous in dealing with the aftermath. The guards washed all traces of blood away from the hallway the fastest they could, and the entire affair was over in merely the time it took to finish a cup of tea. When Fei Shen lifted the hanging screen, he saw the prefectural lord dozing off with his eyes closed. He lowered his voice. "Master, it's been handled." Shenzhequan seemed to be semi-conscious as his half-lidded eyes stared at the candle flame that was about to burn out, giving off an unapproachable aura as he sat there. After a long while, he asked, "Where is Gu Jin?" Fei Shen answered, "He should have arrived at Mount Luo by tonight." Looking as if he was now awake, Shenzhequan breathed out a nasal acknowledgement and said, "Tell him to go back." Fei Shen half-kneeled by the entrance with his upper body partially bending over. He paused for a moment, not daring to overdo his words lest it appeared too woeful, so he said, "He has second master's letter with him." "Master, Mount Luo is not that far away from Duan province. It won't take much time." Shenzhequan was not in a good mood this night and did not respond. Fei Shen promptly shut his mouth and wisely took his leave. In the time that it took to burn through 2 sticks of incense, Qiao Tianya arrived, pushing Yao Wenyu in his wheelchair. The bamboo blinds opened and closed. Shenzhequan said, "Why hasn't Yuan Zhou retired for a rest? It's already so late." Yao Wenyu released his grip on the book he was holding and covered himself properly with the thin blanket. "Without Yan Hiru, the shops in He province are going to be thrown into chaos. Since your lordship is here alone tonight ruminating over countermeasures to deal with this situation, why not hear out my humble opinion?" As someone who used to excel at philosophical discourses, Yuan Zhuo's voice was like the murmuring of spring waters, suitably soothing and extremely pleasant to listen to. Shenzhequan inclined his head. "Light the lamps and prepare the tea." A maidservant entered the room to remove the tea-stained rug and replace the lamps, finally brightening up the room's interior a little. Fei Shen made a special point of getting the maidservant to brew stronger tea so as to perk up the prefectural lord and his advisor. "Kill Yan Hiru, and the shops in He province will be thrown into chaos for a time. Let Yan Hiru live, and all the businesses under the sky will be in turmoil for a lifetime." Shenzhequan did not drink the tea and instead forced himself to stay focused. "Moreover, Yan Hiru was so certain that I wouldn't take his life. If I accede to his wishes, there will be no end of trouble in the future." Shenzhequan had no patience for naughty children. A long time back when Yan Hiru brought up the venerable master Yideng, Shenzhequan had already decided his fate. Shenzhequan could be made a fool of, but he could not be coerced. The truth was that Yan Hiru did not understand Shenzhequan or Xiao Qiye at all. He had not the slightest clue which one of the pair was actually the sheath of the blade. In addition to this, Xiao Qiye was so anxious to find the venerable Yideng because he had just been through a parting by death. Shenzhequan only had to think about how Xiao Qiye would feel after learning of the news, and he had no intent to let Yan Hiru live for another second longer. Yao Wenyu waited for the maidservant to leave before speaking up. Yan Hiru did not bring an entourage along with him this time and left his trusted aides behind in He province, all to inspire fear and misgivings in your lordship. It was as Yan Hiru had said. He did not even know any fancy martial arts moves for show. He dared to take it a step further and strut into the inner chamber to threaten Shenzhequan because he was confident of success. He left his trusted aides in He province. If he did not make it back home as scheduled, the Yan clan would choke off the bottom end of the trade route between Huai province, Chse province, and Cha province and refuse access to the merchants of Zhongbo. This would force Shenzhequan into having no choice but to go past Huai province, take a detour over to the vicinity of Dis city and pass through the port of Yanji to finally make it deep into Juexi. This route was not only a toll on time and energy, they also had to go to painstaking efforts to deal with the checkpoints along the way. Even the slightest slip-up could set them up for failure. "All the merchants in the world are in it for profit," Shenzhequan said. Zongbo is the key transit point for both Libei and Qidong. What the Yan clan would choke off will not be just my trade route but also those merchants who have already invested in it. These people have all now tasted the finer delicacies. Tell them to return to consuming edible wild herbs and vegetables, and no matter how it tastes, their dissatisfied stomachs will not agree. Shenzequan was unlike the bandits Yan Hiru had encountered. He had legitimate power in hand in the east, and it was something that neither Chiyu, Lei Jingzhe, and the likes could hold a candle to. He could finalize the tariffs in both regions in the east, and he held a vice grip on the three strategic points of Loxia Pass, the mutual trade market, as well as Deng province. Even if Yan Hiru wanted to rely solely on business to coerce him, it also depended on whether or not Shenzequan was willing to play along. The Zongbo garrison troops were in severe need of large amounts of military armament this year, and it was impossible for Shenzequan to produce them himself. The copper mines were all in the west. Those merchants who had been stealthily scalping copper meant for government use still had last year's stock in hand, and they were now all burning with anxiety and desperation to hop onto the ship that was Zongbo. There was no need for the prefectural lord to go knocking on their doors. As long as his lordship said the word, these people would be willing to make the long journey over to sell their stocks. It had to be known that Liang Qiushan and Zhang Qingshan were currently conducting strict checks on the goods passing through. If the copper for governmental use still being hidden in these merchants' warehouses were to be exposed, they would be as good as dead. The only person in the world who could swallow up this volume of stocks in one go was Shenzequan. As for the Qidong's military provisions, Shenzequan was not worried either. Initially, when Shenzequan took over the Shi clan's shops, he had gone to quite the effort, counting on Shi Dan and Ji Qing. As the Shi clan was a noble clan that was particular about the bequest of its inheritance only to those of their surname, he spared the life of the eldest Madame Shi. But this was not the case for the Yan clan, who had established themselves through the tea trade and consisted of a den of sworn brothers from the martial arts fraternity. There might have been sentimental ties during Yan Hiru's mother's generation, but when it came to Yan Hiru's time, it was the capable ones who ruled the roost. Without Yan Hiru in the picture, the brothers at 6s and 7s beneath him would all be willing to negotiate with the prefectural lord. Shenzequan did not even need to say a word about the Qidong military provisions, and he would still have people to provide the supplies for him. Yan Hiru was important, but he was nowhere near as significant as he thought himself out to be. The port in Lu province is under the sole charge of Yan Hiru, Yao Wenyu said, the details of which we are indeed unclear about. However, there's still Shi Dan in Juexi to manage the businesses on your lordship's behalf. Get him to assign a few men over to take charge. There's no need to be too overly concerned. What is of utmost urgency at present is the substantial amount of silver required for the construction of the port. I'm afraid it will prove difficult to proceed if the cost is solely borne by Zongbo. Shenzequan asked in response, what Yuan Zhou meant is, your lordship has to return to Chu capital eventually. By then, all the merchants in the world will still be your lordship's merchant. Yao Wenyu took a moment to catch a breather, continuing only after his cough subsided. The business deals that will be conducted upon the completion of the port will profit everyone. So your lordship, why not let the merchants come up with this sum of money to finance the port? Let them have the honor of doing the favor and claim a stake in it at the same time. Your lordship only needs to open up Lu province in the future and adjust the tariffs accordingly, and these people will be the treasury of the new dynasty, as well as the coffer of your lordship. And that was not all. Yan Hiru's idea of building a new port in Lu province was a brilliant one. The bay could accommodate a sizable number of ships, and the revival of Lu province and the towns in its vicinity was right on the horizon. This was a fertile field that was on the point of being reclaimed and put under the plow. As long as these merchants were not muddle-headed fools, they would be unequivocally happy to throw in with Shenzequan and get a share of the pie here. Yao Wenyu could even imagine that when that day came, the malady that was the noble clan would have been eradicated, and the nation would begin its recuperation and rehabilitation. Lu province would become Shenzhequan's largest port, linking up the southeast, and even the first major port to connect to the rest of the world. That would be the day. Yao Wenyu suddenly covered his mouth and started to cough violently. In his haste, he knocked over the teacup, and piping hot tea sloshed and splashed onto his thin blanket, soaking both of his legs. Shenzhequan had already risen to his feet. He caught the teacup and bent over to call out, "Yuanzhou." Yao Wenyu did not manage to finish his sentence. He had so many words left unspoken in his chest, but they were all choked off by his coughs. As he covered his mouth and nose, he raised a hand to signal that he was fine. Fei Sheng. Shenzhequan saw blood seeping through Yao Wenyu's sleeve and immediately barked, "Summon the physician." Outside, Fei Sheng acknowledged his order and turned around to shout for someone. The instant Qiao Tianya heard the crash, he felt an ill sense of foreboding. Without even waiting for Shenzhequan to call for him, he lifted the hanging screen and entered. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 229, Pan Lin. Gu Jin received the letter from Duan province when he was at Mount Luo. At that time, he was just about to get on his horse to continue on his way. With a complicated expression after reading the letter, he turned to look at Huo Lingyuan, who was on his way to transfer horses. "Is this the letter his lordship wrote just before you set off?" Pulling his own horse, Huo Lingyuan gave a nod of his head and unscrewed the water canteen to take a swig. "It was written just last night." Gu Jin kept the letter away in his bosom and took out another one to hand to Huo Lingyuan. "This is from second master to his lordship." What exactly did the Jinyi Wei who went to examine the horse carriage say? That the He province yamen was in such hot pursuit that it forced the carriage driver into a desperate corner, and as he drove along the bridle path that had fallen into disrepair, it plunged into the stream. Huo Lingyuan hung the water canteen back and carefully kept away Xiao Qiye's letter in his bosom. A few men went down to the stream and checked for 4 hours. There was no survivors. Gu Jin's expression gradually darkened. He had come over on orders to watch over the Venerable Master Yideng on Xiao Qiye's behalf, but he did not expect the Venerable Master to be gone just like that. Gu Jin stood rooted in place, feeling perplexed as he muttered to himself, "What is the Venerable Master doing in He province? Isn't that where his home was before he made his vow?" Having ridden for an entire night, Huo Lingyuan was now reeking of sweat all over. Going by what Yan Hiru said, the Venerable Master died of illness. If he did not expect to live long, he would have returned home to see his family. The Venerable Master cut ties with the secular world when he left home to become a monk, and the ones still left in his family are all branch relatives, not his blood brothers. At this point, Gu Jin thought of dying. He continued, "Besides, the Venerable Master agreed to return to dying this year. If he didn't expect to live long, he would have fulfilled his promise first." Huo Lingyuan never had any interactions with the Venerable Master Yideng before. Seeing the sun rising, he said, "I've rested enough. It's time for me to hit the road." Gu Jin led his horse aside a little to give way. After turning his horse around, Huo Lingyuan said to Gu Jin, "When you reach the battle zone, remember to tell second master that Tantai who wants to try out his new blades, too." Gu Jin did not answer him but said instead, "Tell Lao Hu to write a letter to second master himself. I'm not returning." He scuffed the mud off the soles of his boots, flipped onto his horse, and pointed in the other direction with his horsewhip. "I'm going to make a trip to He province." ******. Physicians crowded under the eaves, silent as cicadas in winter, not daring to make a racket. Seeing as this was not the place for discussion, Fei Sheng hurriedly arranged for the physicians to head over next door. Kong Ling did not enter to disturb Yuan Zuo's rest but followed behind Fei Sheng and asked, "What did the physicians say?" Fei Sheng cast a glance at the still bamboo blinds, and lifted an arm to guide Kong Ling to the side. He whispered, "They are all afraid. Their prescriptions can't be compared to the ones our Jin Wei prescribed. None of them dare to go too heavy on the potency and dosage of the medicine. Kong Ling might have been widely read, but he indeed was not well versed in the art of medicine. He remained still for a moment with a slightly stunned expression. Then, Fei Sheng could not say for sure either. Before, everyone had their hopes pinned on the venerable master Yi Deng, and this one move of Yan Hira caught all of them off guard. He avoided the newly sprouted branches and merely said, "His lordship wrote a letter to Qiang last night to get them to search for physicians in the 13 cities of Juexi. They will be able to arrive in Duan province after the 6th month. But how were they to survive through these 3 months?" Fei Sheng did not dare to speak irresponsibly. He was on tenterhooks too, seeing the physicians coming and going last night. Yao Wenyu typically pushed himself to hang in there. Earlier in Tse province, he had drained his energy to placate the scholars who had come to throw in with Shen Zequan. At the same time, he also held discussions with Kong Ling and the rest for nights on end to settle arrangements for the 6 prefectures' yamen. Then he traveled from Tse province to Duan province. In fact, his illness had never taken a turn for the better since his arrival in Duan province. Kong Ling stood for a moment before saying gravely, "Wait for a moment. I'll update his lordship. His lordship has not slept for a night, and he's still waiting in the hall for news. Then you have to persuade my master, too." Fei Sheng was shaken by the sight of Yao Wenyu coughing up blood. He chased a few steps after Kong Ling. "I heard yesterday that the venerable master is gone. Master seems to be in rather low spirits, on top of his worries of advisor Yuan Zhou. Mind that he doesn't fall sick. There's Qiao Tianya and I to keep watch here, nothing serious will happen." Kong Ling hurriedly answered in the affirmative and lifted the hem of his robe to leave the courtyard. When he arrived at Shen Zequan's courtyard, he saw the prefectural lord standing under the eaves listening to Ding Tao. On seeing Kong Ling, Shen Zequan gestured to Ding Tao with a nod of his head to stop for a moment. Ever since that incident in Dun province, Ding Tao had been very well behaved. He promptly shut up and retreated to the side to make way for Kong Ling. Kong Ling deliberated over his words. He has just fallen asleep, and they are now decocting the medicine in his courtyard. Qiao Tianya is keeping watch at the side, so there's no need for your lordship to be too worried. It was peaceful and quiet in the courtyard. Shen Zequan came down the steps and asked. None of the physicians gave a definite answer, right. Kong Ling noted Shen Zequan's displeased expression and followed at his side. These physicians are all from the countryside. They have never seen a figure like Yuan Zhou, so naturally, they do not dare to fool us with common prescriptions. They are also very cautious in their speech, but they are all willing to do their best. No one dares to be sloppy. Being the astute man that he was, Shen Zequan knew on hearing Kong Ling's words that no one among this group of physicians could treat and cure Yuan Zhou. All they dared to do was to nurse him with rest and nourishment, and try their best to avoid risks. Send another urgent letter to Yu Xiaoze. Shen Zequan stopped in his tracks. Tell him to keep an eye out for renowned physicians in the various prefectures when he's on his inspection rounds. Send all the ones he can find to Duan province. Take the physician's fees from my private coffer. Give whatever is needed. Kong Ling stopped, too. He saw the guard on the other end come over to hand over the letter and made no further sound to disrupt Shen Zequan from reading his letter. Shen Zequan turned over the letter and saw Jiqing's personal seal on it. He opened it to read, after which he handed it to Kong Ling and said, "The war in Chu capital is over." Kong Ling read it at the side for a moment. At present, Commander-in-Chief Qi does not lack military provisions. What she lacks is a noble rank and title. The Empress Dowager clearly realizes this, yet she still wants to stubbornly persist in coercing her. She ends up giving Shui Yanqing a helping hand instead. She who rides a tiger finds it difficult to dismount, she has no other way to back down, Shen Zequan said. Deep down, she wants to use Qizuyan, but she indeed has no more bargaining chips to take out. If they were really to come to blows, no one could beat Han Cheng's 20,000 capital troops. What Shen Zequan had spoken of at the beginning of befriending a distant state while attacking one nearby had long taken an about turn. Chu capital's exhaustion was evident. To the east where they faced Zongbo and Libei, they only had the 8th Great Training Division to send as reinforcements in an emergency, and with the issue of the commoners' fields in Dan City blown up to such proportions, they had no military defenses to speak of. Qi Zuyan herself was the last straw Chu capital had to clutch at. Kong Ling slightly sucked in a breath when he reached the end of the letter. Pan Xiongja and Pan Lin are dead. The Empress Dowager's current adversary is Shueziaozuo. Shen Zequan looked at the overcast firmament of heaven, which looked like it was about to rain. So how could she escape unscathed? Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Rain was falling in Chu capital. It was the beginning of the rainy season. The Grand Secretariat wanted to hold Han Cheng accountable. Han Cheng kept to his narrative that the officials that the 8 Great Training Divisions killed in the prisons were all spies from Zongbo. Both sides launched into a war of words on the imperial court, and it was at this time that news of Pan Xiongja's death was reported. It was then that Liang Qiushan recalled that no one paid Pan Xiongja any heed when he cried for help that day while he was locked up in the innermost part of the prison. Everyone had been at daggers drawn with one another at that time, and Pan Xiongja had suffocated to death from the smoke in his cell. It was only when the wardens were cleaning up the cells that his death was discovered. Pan Lin was the one who confessed about the state of the granaries. Shueziaozuo spoke up in Mingli Hall. He was also the one who turned over the Ministry of Revenue's current detailed accounts. This man's crime is not so heinous as to deserve death. Sen Yu found what happened to Pan Lin regrettable, thus, he nodded. That's not to say he should be exonerated. Justice cannot be tampered with but can be tempered with mercy. He still has to be punished, for the law cannot be violated, but discretion can be exercised in light of the circumstances. Kong Qiu pondered it over for a moment and looked over the confession statement presented by the Ministry of Justice. Although Pan Lin confessed, it was only after the imperial court began pursuing the matter. He was already an accessory to crime since the day issues started cropping up in the accounts a long time back. He can be spared the death penalty but not punishment. In the end, the Grand Secretariat decided to dismiss Pan Lin from his position, demote his status and exile him to Hubei province. But as the Dan City case was temporarily still unresolved, Pan Lin had to remain at the relay station and wait to be summoned. Unlike the descendants from Pan Xiongja's generation, Pan Lin studied to be an official and saw himself as a scholar. He was a little arrogant, so he did not get along with young Master Xue and the others. But now, he was reduced from being the young master of a noble clan to a commoner guilty of a crime, and he had also lost his father to death. This abrupt change in his family circumstances compounded his plight in the relay station, where he was given the cold shoulder treatment and handed only cold leftovers for his meals. Young Master Xue once had a verbal dispute with Pan Lin during the banquet celebrating Xiao Qiye's conferment, but in the spirit of visiting, he made a special point of bringing along delicacies to see Pan Lin, hoping to bury the hatchet with the latter before they parted. The errand runner at the relay station led young Master Xue in. Seeing the narrow and cramped room, he asked the errand runner, "Is this where Pan Chenzi is staying?" "He's the legitimate young master of the Pan clan and the vice minister of the Ministry of Revenue. How can you people let him stay here?" The errand runner opened the door with the key and slickly said, "Wasn't the properties of the Pan clan seized and confiscated? He's a criminal, and this is the arrangement made by the imperial court, so how would us small nobodies dare to defy it?" He pushed the door open and instructed, "My lord, please don't stay for too long. We will be held accountable if the Ministry of Justice were to get wind of this." Young Master Xue's skinny and wizened body hunched over as he craned his neck to look in from the side of the door. He saw Pan Lin sitting by the window. This room was extremely dark, and it was leaking rain everywhere, even the floor was soaked through. Pan Lin's robe was damp, as were his boots. He was still wearing the same clothes as he did in prison, and he had some stubble on his face. He looked much too haggard. Young Master Xue strode through the door carrying the food container in hand and called out in a soft voice, "Chenzi, I'm here to see you." Pan Lin turned his eyes and looked at him for a long while before he said, "Have a seat." Young Master Xue set the food container on the table and sat near the chair. He surveyed the surroundings. "At the very least, you are. I'll go and talk to them later. Even a change to another room is fine, too." Pan Lin's eyes reddened. He cut a forlorn sight as he sat all drenched under the rain that was leaking in. Young Master Xue fidgeted and shifted a little. Before things got too awkward, he took the initiative and said, "I'm not here today to mock you. You're going to Hubei province, and it's so far away. Once we part, we won't see each other again in the future. I wanted to see you off." Pan Lin remained unmoved. For some reason, Xue the eldest was gripped by a feeling of sadness. He was of legitimate birth, the same as Pan Lin. But how could legitimate sons of noble families like them end up in such a state? With tears in his eyes, he hesitated for a long time before continuing, "Chenzi, about what happened during the marquee banquet last year to celebrate his conferment. I'm sorry. I heard you let Yuan Zhou go, and I'm very impressed. You have talents, but your family brought this all on you. The senior grand secretary is willing to exempt you from the death penalty because he treasures talents. Once you arrive in Hubei province, you'll still have the chance to show your mettle again." But even Xue Zhiyi himself did not believe these words of his. They were all men who depended on their clans for survival. With this big of a mess that the field taxes had created, Pan Lin would be reviled by all and used as a doormat once he arrived in Hubei province. After a moment of silence, Pan Lin spoke up, "Ping Jing." Xue Zhiyi's courtesy name was Ping Jing. Like Xue Zhiyi's Yanking, they were all given by old Master Xue. He hurriedly responded with an "I." "Back then, when I assumed the post as the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Revenue and had the account books in hand, I hesitated for a long time, but in the end, I did not hand them over to Secretariat Elder Hai. I played jackal to the tiger and abetted the villains, bringing untold sufferings onto the common folks of the 8 cities. My death is not to be regretted, and there's nothing I can say that could vindicate myself. The storm in Chu capital has been ongoing for many years, and now that there is Xue Yanking," Pan Lin looked at Xue Zhiyi, as if he was looking at his own self who still had a chance many years ago, "the glory of the 8 cities has come to an end." Young Master Xue heard a deafening crash of thunderbolt that lit up Chu capital for an instant. He thought Pan Lin would give him some heartfelt advice, but Pan Lin eventually said, "I think you should go." Xue Pingjing pushed the food container over to Pan Lin. "I brought you some food." He fell silent too and sat here until the rain gradually grew heavier and the errand runner outside came a few times to hurry him up. When Xue Pingjing rose to his feet, his robe was wet too. He bowed in farewell to Pan Lin. Pan Lin stood up, straightened his clothes, and returned the bow. Xue Pingjing did not dare to look any further and turned around to leave. In that corridor, he could not tell which way was out. Pan Lin listened to the receding sound of footsteps and sat back down at the table. Through it all, he never touched the food container Xue Pingjing brought. He took up his brush and neatly wrote the words "Statement of Guilt." This letter was not for the imperial court, but for Pan Xiangjia. It was the bidding of farewell between father and son. Pan Lin wrote a very long letter, as if he did not know how to face his father. He wept when he put his brush down, and then he cleaned himself up and lay down on the tattered mat with his clothes in order. He never opened his eyes again. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 230, Spring. Qiao Tianya leaned back into the rattan chair, biting down on a red thread between his lips as he deftly braided it with his fingers. At the hour of Zhou, thin streak of moonlight came across the side of the bridge of his nose, making his lidded eyes appear rather lonely. The seven-stringed guqin rested on the table, covered with silk. It had not been touched in days. Yao Wenyu did not make a sound when he woke up. He turned his head aside to look at Qiao Tianya. Qiao Tianya was like the solitary, lonesome moon that had come to a standstill between the deep valley after a sudden rainstorm, limpid and far away. That unbridled wind turned into an old dream of last night, leaving a ghost of a shadow on him. Yao Wenyu still kept that colored silk ball from that day, but he had long come to understand that he could never walk over to his side. This was the first march of spring, one that came to nothing in its passing. Qiao Tianya took off the red thread and finished up the tail end beautifully. He reached out for Yao Wenyu's hand and put the braided red thread on Yao Wenyu's wrist. Hidden behind the lowered drapes, Yuan Zhou peeked through the gap at this person who was well within his reach. Soundlessly, he started to laugh, but gradually, the side of his pillow grew damp. Qiao Tianya did not lift the hanging drapes open. They relied on merely their fingers to convey the warmth between them, as though this was the closest they could ever get to intimacy. Any closer and it would all vanish. Throughout it all, Yao Wenyu never spoke a word. It was as if he had never woken up at all. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. When Shenzhequan came the next day, Yao Wenyu was already up. He bent slightly towards Shenzhequan in what could be considered a bow. My illness flared suddenly yesterday and held up official business. Yao Wenyu lowered his fingers to pick up the cluttered mess of wiki stones. So I should finish saying my piece while I'm still feeling up to it today. Shenzhequan took his seat. Your illness is only starting to show improvement. It's fine for you to rest for half a month first before discussing it. Idling while sick is still idling. I have nothing to do anyway. Yao Wenyu contemplated it for a few moments. The port of Lu province is, in fact, a matter of priority. Having this place may be likened to having a place in Juexi to talk. What Yao Wenyu was thinking about was different from Kong Ling and the rest. He was much more farsighted, and in this current mutually antagonistic situation, he was more inclined to take in virtuous talents for Shenzhequan than to kill off every single one of Great Zhou officials. You think you lack generals, but in my view, it's just the opposite. Yao Wenyu put the wiki pieces in place. Valiant generals are just what the three lands in the east won't lack most in the future. Be it Wuziu or Tantaihu, they are all capable of assuming sole responsibility and taking complete charge. Your lordship has nothing to worry about over the territories in the east, with them stationed at the frontiers once the war subsides. What your lordship lacks are capable ministers and officials. Although Cheng Feng is decent, he isn't willing to leave Zhongbo, and while Zhou Gui is loyal, he isn't up to taking on great responsibilities. On the other hand, Juexi has gone through several years without falling into the noble clan's hands, and that is precisely because this place has a capable minister, that is Zhang Qingshan. The real reason Shui Yanqing could stir up a storm in the imperial court is because of the people from the proactive faction who support him. The heir apparent is only an opportunity. These people are not of high ranks, but they are the key that decides whether the reforms can be pushed through. They work for the good of the people in Juexi, wanting to revitalize the Li clan's empire and bring about the resurgence during the reign of Yanji again. They are scholars with far more boldness of vision than the officials in the capital, and they are also the last worthy officials of Great Zhou. Being enthroned as the supreme ruler was no easy feat. A change of dynasty and government meant that innumerable scholars had to sever their dreams of the past. The state of affairs in the imperial court had already degenerated to such an extent, but Hai Lianji and Shui Ziuzhuo had never once harbored the idea of replacing the Li clan. This was because doing so was comparable to the crime of patricide. Under the principles of social order constituting the cardinal relationships between the ruler and his subjects, and the father and his sons, the Li clan was and had been the son of heaven for centuries. This not only represented the need to shout "Long live your majesty" as per the code of ethics, but also symbolized generations of people following a legitimate lineage of descendants. If Shenzhen set foot into Chu capital again, then what the prefectural lord would be defeating was the legitimate son of heaven that towered tall and majestic over them all. He had to obtain the heaven-bestowed right to kill the sovereign before he could strip himself of the treacherous traitor label. Yet, this was far from enough. He must employ a suitable way to make the surviving officials of the Li clan put themselves at his disposal willingly. Otherwise, even if he won over the empire, he would not be able to achieve the flourishing era of prosperity that Qi Huilian had once spoken of. Shui Yanking's cleaning up of the 8 cities' field taxes was originally a good thing, but he was too hasty in going about it. A significant portion of Chu capital's taxes now is all tied up in the 8 cities' field taxes. Now that he has decisively removed the Pan clan of Dan City, he has 2 routes to take. The first one is to push on and continue to investigate the remaining 7 cities and resurvey the lands as fast as he can, and the second one is to slow down and give the remaining 7 cities a chance to pay the overdue taxes. In the first option, the fields have to be returned to the commoners, but the commoners of the 8 cities have long left their homes to make the long journey to Zongbo. If he re-records the households in the census registers, he will hold up the plowing this year. When that happens, the issue of keeping the common folks fed in 3 lands of Great Zhou after autumn will fall to Jiuqing and He province to resolve. In the second option, the field tax deficits will be apportioned between the 8 cities, and the 8 cities will naturally continue to split the amount between the commoners. A cruel regime that oppresses and exploits its people causes more distress and pangs than tigers with their ferocious claws and fangs. So it's really no different from before. By the time Jiuqing gets tired of the requisitions, the commoners of the 13 cities would have barely enough to fill their stomachs. If your lordship uses the port of Lu province as an opportunity to build an east-west waterway and link up to the north-south bridle path, He province and Zongbo would be able to alleviate Jiuqing's burden. By the time Yao Wenyu spoke to this point, the area under the eaves was already bathed in sunlight. Holding a wiki stone between his fingers, he took a breather before continuing, "Your lordship presumably has a plan in mind long before you killed and removed Yan Hira from the equation. He province is close to Qidong." Shenzhen set down a wiki piece after Yao Wenyu. "If I can't get my hands on this land, I won't be able to sleep at night." All Yan Hira thought about was business, but Shenzhen had far more than business on his mind. Qi Zuyan joined forces with Shui Ziozhuo in the Dan City case, which meant that the heir apparent would be bestowing a noble title upon her. In that case, she would be a Marquis of Great Zhou in the future. The garrison troops of the 5 commanderies of Qidong were right to the south of Zongbo. Shenzhen must choke off the key supply route of Qidong to the west, of which He province was a necessary route that they had to pass through. Shenzhen was blunt with his words. If Qi Zuyan were to go all out to protect the Li clan, then Deng province of Zongbo would be Shenzhen's weakest link. He had to seize control of He province, which was even more important to Qidong. Only then would he be able to sit at the same table and on equal footing with Qi Zuyan at all times. Qi Xiu is already advanced in age, and Qi Zuyan is a far more suitable candidate than anyone else to be the commander-in-chief. Shenzhen continued. Lu Guangbai remains in Libei because he no longer wants to be a general of Great Zhou, and Qi Zuyan has to mend the gap left in Qidong by the Bianjun commandery herself. Chu capital wants her to become a soldier who protects the emperor, but even so, she has to be able to run over. Perhaps Qi Zuyan could really run her way over. That was why Shenzhen choked off the roads, too. Commander-in-Chief Qi has been in a predicament over money in recent years. Her willingness to mobilize troops against the Qingsha tribe was because she was assessing the situation, too. Yao Wenyu started to cough softly. Shenzhen thus stopped bringing up official affairs and merely said, "Qiao Tianya now has to govern the imperial cavalry, and he's at the military drill grounds during the day, so negligence on his part is inevitable. I'll write a letter to Shifu and ask him to come over to Duan province to take care of you." Yao Wenyu did not refuse. He wiped his mouth with his handkerchief and said, "It's so far away. I shall have to impose on Shifu to make the trip over." Shenzhequan saw the red thread on Yuan Zuo's wrist, which was concealed by his sleeve when he raised his hand. He did not ask about it and saw Hanu, which had just woken up, brushing against the door as it made its way over. Chu capital is your old home, Shenzhequan said. I heard Shi Hongxian say before that you always return to the capital in spring every year. Next year, or perhaps a few years later, you will be able to take a good look at the springtime scenery. Yao Wenyu knew Shenzhequan was comforting him. He flashed a slight smile and did not answer him, but said, since the case of Dan City is coming to a close, where is Pan Lin going to be exiled to? Shenzhequan lowered his folding fan to block Hanu. Kong Qiu meant to exile him to Huai province, but he went on a hunger strike at the Chu capital relay station and starved himself to death. Yao Wenyu sat in silence for a long time. Pan Lin achieved success young, and his career as an official was smooth sailing. The remarks he made to Shuizaiyi back then during the feast to celebrate Xiao Qiye's conferment turned out to be prophetic after all, and he ended up dying of starvation. Encumbered by his lineage, he was now finally free. Chu capital was his former home. Yao Wenyu shifted his eyes to look at the courtyard. But there were no longer any sights worth going back for. End chapter. Note, hour of Zhou is 1 to 3 a.m. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 231, Feigns. At the time Pan Lin died, Li Jianting pulled through. The maids and eunuchs serving in her palace barely had time to weep for joy when they were taken into prison. The heir apparent was poisoned, therefore the condiment service was promptly sealed off, while all the eunuchs on duty were imprisoned. Fu Man, given his experience during the reign of Emperor Tianqian, took charge of this case and put them through heavy torture. Zuzong. The junior eunuch could not stand the severe beating and cried out as he sprawled over the bench. Please have mercy. Dressed in a python-patterned Yisan robe and Yandun hat, Fu Man stood with his hands on his back while he scrutinized the calligraphy on the wall. The eunuchs with the flogging paddles were all leftover members from the Eastern Depot. Skilled in the art of torture, they flogged the palace eunuch until he almost fainted. Please spare my life, this junior eunuch choked with sobs. Fu Man turned his head back. The heir apparent was poisoned while you people were serving her. If you want to live, you have to give me a clear account of what happened. These inner palace eunuchs entered the palace after Emperor Tianqian. To date, they still did not know what the heir apparent was poisoned with, so there was nothing at all they could account for. Fu Man patiently said, think about what the heir apparent ate or wore that day. There are so many people in the condiment service, so perhaps a couple with ulterior motive sneaked their way in. All of you have close contacts with them, so why can't you think of any now? The eunuch caught the hint in his words, but he dared not be so presumptuous as to speculate, so he hemmed and hawed without saying a word still. Fu Man flung his sleeve, as if exasperated with the eunuch for failing to come through, and had the old eunuch with the paddle continue with his flogging. The beating was so brutal that blood saturated the eunuch's mouth. Digging his fingers into the bench, he whimpered and sobbed, stop, stop it. I'll tell you. Fu Man paid no attention to him. The eunuch gulped down the blood froth. Those in charge of food and beverages, and that garden service, all had new faces I don't recognize. Only then did Fu Man turn to the side and coax him softly, do you have contacts with them? The eunuch shook his head hard, not daring to answer this question. He raised his eyes tentatively to get a feel of Fu Man's expression and sobbed in a small voice, I don't recognize them. If you don't recognize them, how do you know which department they belong to? Fu Man intentionally guided him. Someone must have told you, and that was how you knew. The eunuch answered, the one who stands guard at the door to the palace. Tch, Fu Man bent down. Can someone who stands guard at the door get close to the heir apparent? Whoever serves the heir apparent is usually the one who knows it best. The eunuch did not dare to breathe heavily as he followed along and answered, Feng Quan is usually the one serving her. Fu Man clapped his hands lightly at him and said, there you go. Easy, isn't it? Asterisk asterisk asterisk. With the case in Fu Man's hands, the chances of identifying the real culprit were 0. He had planted his men in Li Jianting's palace at Han Cheng's instigation. The poison had nothing to do with the food and beverages. The problem lay in the chopsticks Li Jianting used for her meal that day. Chaos had broken out in the palace when the heir apparent collapsed, and Fu Man had long gotten someone to steal and replace the original chopsticks to hide all the clues. Fu Man stepped out of the hall, but before he could walk out of the courtyard, he saw several sedan bearers standing outside under the pagoda tree waiting for him. The supervising officials from the Ministry of Justice had just left, so Fu Man was on guard as he lifted the hem of his robe and strode out with a smiling face. Who is this distinguished person looking for me? You just need to send me a message, there's no need to go to the extent of coming over to invite me. Coincidentally, I have a case to attend to now and can't get away. The curtain opened, and Han Cheng sneered. It has been a few days since I last saw you, and you son of a bitch has started to put on airs in imitation of your forefather. What? I'm not worthy enough to invite you now. This motherfucker again. Fu Man obediently bent at the waist. This humble slave thought it was those old fogies from the Grand Secretariat who keep sticking to me like glue while I'm investigating the case. I was just feeling vexed over it and never expected it to be you. Look at what you are saying. When this humble slave sees you, it's like, what do you call it? Oh, a baby sparrow seeking refuge in the woods. He played dumb, knowing Han Cheng was a sucker for this. Sure enough, Han Cheng's expression brightened a little. Not dwelling any further on the matter, he threw down the curtain and commanded, come. For the entire journey, Fu Man cursed as he walked, keeping it all pent up in his heart. When he arrived at the place and saw that it was Han Cheng's private residence, he knew the latter was certain to ask him about the heir apparent's case. He stepped through the door, but before he could start toadying up to Han Cheng, he saw the gleaming blades inside. He immediately forgot what he was going to say and fell to his knees with a thud. Look at how cowardly you are. Han Cheng lifted the teapot to pour tea without telling Fu Man to get up, and you still want to imitate Pan Rugui? Are you even worthy? No, definitely not worthy. Bracing himself against the ground, Fu Man forced an apologetic smile. This humble slave is just a lowly slave. How could I be compared to the Lao Zuzong? I wouldn't dare to harbor such intent. Han Cheng set the teapot back. I told you to poison Li Jianting. What poison did you give her? Fu Man's back was drenched in a cold sweat. He must not hesitate, so he recited what he had rehearsed to himself countless of times. This slave did as Commander Han said and gave her death chase. That's strange. Han Cheng said mockingly. This drug can poison several strong men to death, yet it can't kill one woman. Fu Man felt the chill at the back of his neck. Those were real blades and they were already pressing in close to him. The muscles on his face twitched, and he suddenly lifted a hand to slap himself. With a change in expression, he cried, "You're hurting my feelings with those words. How would I dare to plot with outsiders to harm my own father? Besides, Shui Yanqing, Kong Qiu and the few of them detest eunuchs and order me around like I'm a livestock. This slave really did put in death chase. I still have the chopsticks. I wouldn't dare to be sloppy." Midway through crying, Fu Man wiped his tears. "I'm puzzled too. It's really mind-boggling. That was death chase, but the heir apparent unexpectedly got better after vomiting a few times. If that's not absurd, I don't know what is." Han Cheng was livid. Li Jianting's fate, whether she lived or died, determined the direction in which the situation would develop. He even brought out the 8 great training divisions on the gamble that the heir apparent would die, but who would have expected Li Jianting to be fine? The fact that the Dan City case still had yet to reach a conclusion meant that they intended to continue with the investigation. Without the Pan clan, the next one to be targeted would be the Marquis of Helian's Fei clan. Everyone from the 7 cities was at risk. Have you mentioned the poisoning to anyone else? Fu Man hurriedly answered, how would the slave dare? You'd better not. Han Cheng suddenly flung away the teacup in his hand. You're the one who botched this, so you have to clean it up now. All those people in her palace can't be kept alive. Take this opportunity to kill them all. If Li Jianting was poisoned with death chase, she would die for certain. So either someone had swapped out the poison midway or Fu Man did not poison her with death chase at all. No matter what, those people serving in her bedchamber could not be kept around any longer. It was very possible some other people had slipped their way in. The eunuchs were a crafty lot. These despicable castrated bunches were best at trimming their sails and going where the winds blew. Fu Man was no one decent either. Now that the noble clans had taken a hit and suffered damage, there was no guarantee that Fu Man would not get any funny ideas. Keeping him around any further would be trouble. Han Cheng was suspicious by nature, and he was now like a tightly wound bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. He got up and looked at Fu Man as he pressed in a few steps closer towards the ladder, his killing intent already ignited. Seeing as he was about to be decapitated soon, Fu Man shouted out in desperation. The senior Grand Secretary ordered me to investigate the case, so there's still a chance to turn things around. The commander need not worry. I'll surely clean it up. Those supervising officials from the Ministry of Justice are all my acquaintances. If anything goes awry again, I myself will bring my own head over to you. Han Cheng could not kill him for real at this point in time, either. Seeing his ghastly pale face and how he looked so useless, he said, mess this up again, and the Empress Dowager will not keep you alive even if I want to. You want to be the top eunuch, but you also need to have the capability to. Fu Man repeatedly concurred, his heart still in his mouth. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. While it was overcast and rainy for days on end in Chu capital, it was still sunny in the battle zone. The commanding generals of the 3 camps took turns rotating around the camps. Today, it was Xiao Qiye's turn to head over to the Shai camp. Lu Guangbai stepped out of the military tent to receive him, and Xiao Qiye removed his helmet to greet him. Lu Guangbai jumped to catch Xiao Qiye's helmet and in doing so, saw the dent on it. Hassan is much better than us at playing with the catapults. Xiao Qiye handed the reins to Chen Yang and remained standing in place to remove his arm guard. The watchtower of Sha'ir camp collapsed after being smashed yesterday. Send a verbal message to Shifu post-haste and have him get the military craftsmen to rush over to Sha'ir camp. Jiming dispatched a new batch of military craftsmen this way. If you can't wait, I'll send the military craftsmen from the Bianbo camp over to fill in. Lu Guangbai returned the helmet to Chen Yang. The wall of Shazan camp was repaired, only to collapse again. Qiankai Shifu can't spare you any extra manpower on his end. Xiao Qiye had gotten a lot more tanned during this period of time. He watched Meng hovering over the camp. The Biancha cavalry numbers are increasing. After the Duan province scorpions were encircled and annihilated, Hassan started to intensify his attacks on them. It was most glaringly obvious in the 3rd month. Xiao Qiye realized Hassan was frantically assembling men in the east, and the Biancha cavalry numbers were multiplying. Last year, they could only launch an attack with their main forces while relying on their remaining soldiers to carry out sneak attacks, but now, Hassan was able to split up his forces to attack both camps at the same time. Amuir put Hassan in the north but did not head down south himself, Lu Guangbai said. That's because he wanted to expand his territory deep into the desert and get the remaining 6 tribes to submit and pledge allegiance to him as soon as possible. It's likely due to Amuir's newly acquired helping hands that gives Hassan the cavalry to launch simultaneous attacks now. Xiao Qiye wiped the dust on his cheeks with a pensive expression. Lu Guangbai continued, but Hassan's battle strategies has been very unstable as of late. Xiao Qiye was the one who killed Achi. Hassan thought that Xiao Qiye would lead the new armored cavalry out into the world when he returned to the battle zone, but Xiao Qiye did not do so. That meant Hassan had no way of coming face to face with the new armored cavalry. It was as if they had swapped places. What was unknown to him was a danger that could not be forestalled. Xiao Qiye was taking away Hassan's initiative, one that would allow him to call the shots. The battles Hassan fought in the northern and southern battlefields are all battles that he was assured of victory. Xiao Qiye turned his thumb ring. Part of his victories stemmed from his familiarity with the commanding generals. That particular battle Qi Ziyan fought in the battle zone was proof of this. Xiao Jiming realized this, and that was why he disrupted the order of the battle zone. It was when Hassan met with the Libai armored cavalry again that he realized what Xiao Jiming was doing. Xiao Jiming was the kind of commander-in-chief Hassan disliked the most, because Xiao Jiming would not get flustered if he could not keep up with the pace. He always seemed to be able to maintain his composure. This was both Xiao Jiming's character and Xiao Jiming's style. He understood that he could not beat Hassan, so he never thought of pitting himself against Hassan on the battlefield to emerge victorious or not. What he had been doing these past few months was to relax Libai's rhythm. The armored cavalry was in the process of recovery. Even if they could not win, they would not be led by the nose by Hassan as they had before. Hassan will get anxious too when he's standing so close to the goal, Xiao Qiye said in a deep, quiet voice. After all, he also just wants to win. Xiao Jiming wanted to leave the opportunity to Xiao Qiye. Lu Guangbai looked at Xiao Qiye. Amuir has invested all his efforts in him. His win has a decisive bearing on Amuir's dignity in the face of the 12 tribes. If he can't win this battle, he cannot become the future great ruler of the 12 tribes. Xiao Qiye did not care why Hassan wanted to win at all, he only wanted Hassan's head. As if understanding this point, Lu Guangbai did not continue but said instead, the source of Hassan's anxiety and apprehension comes from the south, too. With Commander-in-Chief Qi fighting the Qingsha tribe, they have to face pressure from both sides. But was Hassan really restless with anxiety over the north and south battlefield? Xiao Qiye felt that there was another significance to Hassan's onslaughts of attack during this period of time. Perhaps Hassan wanted to use such a diversionary tactic to hide his true target. Rather than fight wars of attrition with Libai and Qidong again, Zhongbo was actually the best place to attack. Hassan was a master at feigns. Like a wolf creeping in the darkness, Xiao Qiye stared fixedly at every move Hassan made. His understanding of Hassan had already far exceeded Hassan's understanding of him. End chapter. Note: 1. Condiment service is one of the sections/offices the imperial palace eunuchs in the Ming dynasty. They are in charge of condiments such as vinegar, sauces, and so on. 2. Garden service is one of the sections/offices of the imperial palace eunuch in charge of fruits and vegetables.